Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today I'm going to be doing a little bit of gaming news. It seems like we do gaming news every once in a while on Fridays, and today seems like no different. And that's because there's been a couple of announcements that have been made that I do want to talk a little bit about. There's a new game which was announced, and there is a sort of publishing agreement for a game that I wasn't sure how seriously to take. So figured, why don't we go ahead and jump in and take a little bit of a look at what we know, which frankly isn't a lot, and go from there. So first things first, I suppose, let's look at the new game, and that is a game being developed by Kraken Studios. They are the developers behind Warplan, Warplan Pacific. In particular, those are games I'm familiar with them from, and then they've also made sort of a fantasy game called Kingdom, Dungeon, and Hero. Now, Warplan and Warplan Pacific were turn-based, grand strategy-style war games, kind of similar to Strategic Command. I'll be honest, I wasn't super impressed with Warplan 1. I thought the UI was a little confusing. I thought information was not super well communicated to the player. And I just like the Strategic Command game style better. I think it has some issues with naval combat and the way that it models naval combat, because all of those world map turn-based strategy war games always feel like naval combat is sort of an afterthought, and none of them ever feel right. And I don't know that you can ever really get war games naval combat right until you embrace a we go system. I go, you go is just not something that works with that. But I digress. That's not the point of this topic. So Warplan was published by Slytherin. Warplan Pacific was also published by Slytherin. I didn't play Warplan Pacific, which sort of took the game to the Pacific Theater, made some tweaks perhaps, maybe, that made naval combat make a little more sense. I don't know. I didn't play it. But in any event, those were published by Slytherin. And then last year, they developed a game called Kingdom, Dungeon, and Hero, which was not published by Slytherin. It was self-published by Kraken, and it was sort of this fantasy world strategy and adventure game, which honestly I see pop up in my Steam, recommended every now and then. I'm like, maybe I should give that a look, but I have not yet. All of that being said, apparently, and I haven't been following him on Twitter, so I haven't been super close to this, but the developer announced a new game just like 2 or 3 days ago. I mean, he's been talking about it on Twitter for a little while, but the Steam page went live a few days ago, and it's kind of interesting because the Steam page about the game says, Warplan 2 is a World War II military simulation war game based on history. But then the title of the game is Total Victory World Conflict 1939 to 1945. But then you go to Twitter and the developer is tweeting all about it being Warplan 2. And so I think, and what I remembered happening when it was first posted was it was called Warplan 2 when it was first posted. I'm wondering if Slytherin owns the Warplan name, and if maybe they were like, hey, you want to make a new game without us? That's fine. But we own that name, so you better come up with a different title. I could be wrong, but it is interesting that he references Warplan 2 a ton in different places, but the title is mysteriously not Warplan 2. So, in any event, this is a sequel to Warplan, whether it's called Total Victory or whether it's called Warplan 2. It is a sequel to Warplan. It does apparently use the fantasy, medieval, hero, kingdom, dungeon game that I mentioned. It does apparently use that game's engine, which I think is interesting. And it does, we don't know a ton about it. It sounds like they are making production a bigger part of the game. More resource types like ore and oil are both, have to be used to then be used in factories, which I think is interesting. I love a good economic sim. I love games that are like, hey, we're going to dig into the economics of World War II. We're going to dig into the resource nature of World War II. I think that's one of the great things about War in the Pacific is that the resources mean something. It's not just supply, but it's actually churning your economy along. So that is something that could cause me to get into this game and be interested in it. The handful of screenshots that we have, the economy does look like there is something there. You see oil, you see ore, you see industry and strategic resources. So who knows? Maybe they're trying to take a little bit out of the War in the Pacific playbook from an economic standpoint. That being said, it is advertised as sort of a mid-level complexity game, so I think it'll be a little more complex than Strategic Command, but perhaps less so than War in the Pacific, because Strategic Command the economy's all under the hood. Like, you get points every year based on different spots in the map you hold, but you don't have to worry about managing resources. So definitely a level of complexity beyond that. The maps are larger, it would appear, based on the right up here. I think it was like 15 by like 20 or something or other for the previous games. This one is 20 by 32 kilometers, 20 meters by 32 kilometer hex map. So that sounds big. It has, I guess, new naval mission types. Apparently the naval mission types were popular in the previous game, although I did not play that, so I don't know. There are resource and supply convoys, roads, double and single rail hexes, shipyards, dockyards, and submarine pens. I don't know how big of a role they play in the world, but they do exist. And there are 23 research categories for doing R&D, which apparently is more than in the previous version of the game. That's about all we know. We really don't know much. It does look like it's being self-published, not published by Slytherin, so that was another reason I wanted to mention this. Independent wargame developers don't get a lot of attention. I think I saw it on the Reddit page that the developer had announced the game was being made there. But especially with a new name, it's going to be hard for folks like this to get discovered. So worth a look, I think. Check out the Steam page, see if that's something you want to keep an eye on. It's not slated to come out till next year, so we'll see. Maybe if we get toward the end of the year, maybe it'll end up in one of my lists for most anticipated of 2026. I don't know, but we will see. Anyway, that is Total Victory World Conflict 1939 to 1945. We will see how that game plays out. We know almost nothing about it yet, so we will have to wait to find out something about it as we move forward. And with that being said, that brings us to the second news item I wanted to talk about today. All right, and the second gaming news item I wanted to talk about is a game called Gilded Destiny, being developed by Aquilia Interactive. This game, by all accounts, looks to me like it is trying to be a Victoria sort of competitor. In particular, the aesthetics feel very Victoria 2, so maybe a little less open world, a little bit more sort of old graphical map style to look something more like Victoria 2 as opposed to Victoria 3, which is the newest game out by Paradox. Now, I did not know how seriously to take this game. I think I had mentioned it on a podcast, a Single Malt Strategy podcast episode around the turn of the year as something I had seen, but wasn't really sure, is this going to be vaporware or is this going to be real? Because a lot of games, when they're trying to be like, hey, we're going to do Victoria like they used to be before they got big, a lot of those kind of games or developers where they're like individual developers, they just don't go anywhere. You see them pop up on Steam and then you never hear from them again. Or maybe 6 years later they release something and it's broken. And so I didn't want to like hype it as this next big thing when I had seen a little bit about it, but I hadn't really seen enough to know, like, should I be confident in these guys? Aquilia has released like a shipping game, but I've never played it, and I can't really see a ton of evidence of them being sort of an established studio to take super seriously. That being said, what changed my assessment of all of this is that Aquilia Interactive, I was scrolling through LinkedIn the other day. Yeah, I know, great place for gaming news. Although actually there is some pretty interesting stuff. A couple of interesting followers who have some data that you can look at for different games and information in the industry that I think is interesting to follow. Anyway, I follow Hooded Horse. You guess where this is going now. I follow Hooded Horse on LinkedIn, and they make a lot of their gaming announcements there. And Hooded Horse announced just a couple of days ago that they signed a publishing agreement with Aquilia Interactive to publish Gilded Destiny. So that immediately made the game go from, we'll see if this ever gets made, interesting idea, some interesting art concepts, to, this has a pretty high likelihood of occurring. Hooded Horse has had a few games. There was like a Space Crusader Kings game that was going to come out that I think they ended up dropping, and maybe it's still in development, but like it was a game that they had signed and then they unsigned. But generally, my experience, since Hooded Horse is sort of barging onto the scene a couple of years ago, was that if they sign a publishing agreement with someone, something's going to come out, and there's a fairly good chance it's going to be something interesting to me. And a number of the games they've released have been great. So I was pretty optimistic when I saw that they signed Hooded Horse, that like they obviously must have something that they're showing to Hooded Horse that is encouraging enough to get Hooded Horse to want to, presumably dedicate resources to them and making Gilded Destiny a thing. I have wanted a Pride of Nations remake for a while, something that runs better on modern systems. So for a game that is like a pausable real-time grand strategy game in the vein of Victoria, for another game to be being developed in this sort of space, and for there seemingly to be a decent likelihood that it gets made because it has a publisher that just recently signed it, I'm pretty excited to see what comes of it. I mean, we really don't know a ton about the game. It takes place during the Gilded Age. It's sort of the age of imperialism, the age of Victoria, if you will. You can move armies around on the map. I don't, know what happens when you fight tactical battles. I don't think you fight them there. You build up your industry, your empire. You help shape society with different policies and things like that. There's apparently historical leaders that are or characters that are in the game. So I'm hoping kind of where this game goes is that they're like, hey, I like Victoria, to be honest. I think Victoria 3 is interesting and I've enjoyed playing it. But what I will say is one of the things I miss from Victoria 2 is a little bit more scripted historical events. Everybody in Paradox seems to have gone down this everything needs to be a sandbox and you can totally customize the past to what you want it to be, which I think works great for certain games like CK that are heavily role-playing and story-based. I don't think it works as well for Victoria because one of the big plugs and appeal of Victoria is the age you exist in. And I think when you lose a lot of those historical events, you lose that character and that flavor. I am hoping that this is like Victoria 2 and that they bring back, or they include the real feeling of history that existed back then. Also interesting, like on their store page, there's sort of this, I guess you can edit the map and edit countries like starting borders and things like that, which is kind of interesting. For a game like this, that is kind of neat. Like they've got a little GIF of someone putting a mountain range in France and changing the boundaries of France. So I like that. Looks really interesting. I don't know when this game will come out. It says 2025. I think it said 2024 last year. Steam page dates don't mean a lot. I would assume it's probably 2026, but we will see. They haven't shared a lot. There's like 14 developer diaries, but they're all alpha stage developer diaries, and the last one was January. So perhaps, with the presumably the influx of support from Hooded Horse, that'll be enough to get them over the finish line and released. But I would still assume we're talking 2026. But anyway, I've talked 12 minutes about two games we know almost nothing about. I mainly just wanted to let you guys know this because I felt like, especially the Hooded Horse thing, where it's like, unless you're following them on social or you're following them on LinkedIn like a crazy person like me, you probably would have never seen that. And then also the Warplan 2, like there's no publisher behind that game. It's just the developer. So, unless you were paying attention to a couple of Reddit threads where it popped up or a Facebook thread or two where it popped up, you would probably never know that game was being developed. So I wanted to let you guys know about it so you had a chance to see the links in the description, check them out, see if they're interesting to you. I have no vested interest in one way or the other, but I will probably for sure check Gilded Destiny out if and when that ever comes out. I'll probably check Total Victory out also, but we'll see. Anyway, guys, that's all I got for you. Hope you guys had a great week, a great Friday. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'm out. Bye-bye.